strand of hair just pops out. Is that close enough?
Probably, yeah.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. It's not like a meditation where you have to be
I
eating the
know.
app.
I'm so used to you're like, you need to be eating the microphone. And then in here, when we're podcasting, it's down there. This is why I'm confused.
Well, that's because we talk loud. Or I try to talk loud to make you try to talk louder.
I see. This is very interesting information.
I'm modeling for you.
I see. Okay. Welcome to Living Luna live. We're live in the studio for
Woo!
once.
Live
We
in the studio.
live in the studio with a cat,
Yep.
the sweetest little baby cat.
Tuesday.
So we had some scheduling that went a little awry today, no big deal, and as always we try to go with the flow and face things as they come up. So we decided to just take this opportunity to get on live and record our next episode for
Mm-hmm.
the Living Lunas podcast, which if you have not listened to yet, we have been running for right at about a year now.
Yep.
It's actually about a year and a month since we Tuesday.
Sorry, we're getting distracted by our cute
Sweet
cat.
Tuesday. It's been a year and a month and 11 days.
Mm-hmm.
It's been 111.
Wow.
11
Wow.
11 since we released our first podcast. So
Mhm.
that's a cool live realization right there. And sweet Tuesday. This whole episode is just going to be me commenting on Tuesday. We're not even going to get into any actual real content.
I know they're seeing the title of spiritual bypassing and codependency
And we're
as
just
like the
here
title.
petting a cat.
Yeah.
So
Our cats just are spiritual bypassers.
cats are indeed a distraction sometimes, which is definitely part of this practice. Spiritual bypassing is a topic that's been coming up, I think, for a lot of us lately. A lot of us.
Yeah.
And I know I've been doing a lot of client work lately where this idea of bypassing in general is coming up, mental health bypassing and spiritual bypassing, positive bypassing, like the whole toxic positivity, but just this idea of bypassing over something that feels uncomfortable rather than honoring the deeper wisdom that exists within that shadow side of things. So, to me, that's what bypassing is. What does it bring up for you?
Bypassing, well, I've been working really hard on being more intentionally present because discomfort, like trying to get out of discomfort, people will immediately get out of the present.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like I'll feel uncomfortable in some way and then I'll be like, well, now I'm just going to dissociate in some way. Whether that be scrolling my phone, whether it be binge eating something. It's like you can seek comfort. Like you can still have coping skills that bring comfort back in for you. But it's like if you don't sit and try and recognize like where is this discomfort coming from, I think the bypassing can come with like if it takes longer than 5 seconds for us to immediately know where the discomfort's coming from, then we're like, I'll never figure it out. Time to dissociate. Like,
And this, that time to dissociate is literally what's called the phobia of inner experience in some psychology. And when you think about it, it is true. We literally develop this fear or this phobia of having an inner experience because we haven't been taught culturally, most of us, especially not growing up, most of us, how to sit with the uncomfortable feelings that exist within us. We've been told, when I was growing up, and this is not me criticizing my parents, it's just what it was. My mom, if we had emotions, would say, "Here's chocolate." Right? This is how you deal with this tough emotion, and that's what she was taught, so she passed that on. And there was no ability to question whether that was right for me or not because we didn't have the capacity to have those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So it is this phobia of inner experience that keeps us from looking at the vulnerable parts of us, the shadow side, the pain, the discomfort, because we're afraid of what we're going to see. But then in that, we're doing this, we're tensing and we're literally creating the tension
Mm-hmm.
that we're afraid of.
Yeah. Yep. And also, when you were talking about like that experience, there's often like if a child experiences big feelings in a public space, there can be a parental tension of like this is too much. This is like, you're being too much. You're overreacting. You're making a big deal out of nothing, kind of invalidating the internal experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's like we try our best to bypass the big feelings so that we aren't a burden on others or that we don't are not perceived as too much. So it's like because other people have placed that on us and we're like, I don't ever want to feel like that ever again. So I might as well just feel terrible internally without
Or
real
feel nothing.
or feel nothing. Yeah. And then just move on from there and like to protect us. Like it's like in order to protect us ourselves from feeling terrible about someone telling us that we're too much, we still feel terrible but in a different way.
Yeah. And this bypassing can go on to show up in all of these innocuous ways. I've over the last few weeks really been diving deep into I'm in my spiral dance. I'm in my return to cycle, to beginning of cycle as it were, at the end of a rebirth period. And in that I'm encountering all of these old themes that are arising for me to look at them again. And what was distinctly different this time was I've reached a stage where I don't bypass in any way the mental health, the spiritual health, maybe a little bit of the distraction, a little bit of the dissociation from time to time, but more intentionally, if that makes sense, like a break, instead of I can't handle this, I need to completely retreat into myself, I can't look at this pain. And so what was different in this time was, wow, I'm in fucking pain. Can you say that live on Facebook? I did.
Yes.
I don't care about the rules that you make up, society. Sue me. And I was like, I'm in this pain. I am seeing the ripples of these old traumatic patterns coming up yet again to be looked at. And it was shitty. It hurt. And instead of being like, oh no, we're not going to deal with this, we're going to run away from this, I just got in the feels with it. And in the feels with it was beautiful clarity and community and communication. And that can't happen if we are stopping ourselves from using our voices because we are afraid that we're going to be too much or not enough.
Yeah. Yeah. That was reminding me of something I was talking to my supervisor about is like the base things I work on with my clients is to first recognize your needs so that you can advocate for them.
Mm-hmm.
But how are you to recognize your needs if you're bypassing the feelings that are giving you the information of what you need?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. And that's some of that like mental bypassing that we can do is, I mean, the whole, you have to feel it, feel with it to deal with it, or whatever those sayings are. Like, there's a lot of truth in that. And all feelings are information. And so when we're avoiding receiving certain information, we can't make an informed decision to move forward.
I mean, the avoiding piece, is it like I've heard about situations where we are avoiding because, or we're not necessarily, it's part avoidance and part denial. Um, Kind of like if there was bad stuff that was happening in the home, sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, but other parent, why didn't you see what this one parent was doing to me? And like the other parent was it kind of in such dissociative denial because they're like, if I admit that I'm seeing this, then I have to do a lot of accountability stuff. It's going to ruin the status quo right now. Like, if I just bypass and deny, then I won't be like, my whole world won't go up in flames, basically.
Right.
And so it's that thing too is like, if this is the thing with healing, like when someone comes to therapy to heal, they still also have to look at the shadow parts of themselves, the parts
Mm-hmm.
of themselves that they're like ashamed of, or the parts of themselves that they are, worried that they have and aren't really taking accountability for because they're just constantly in denial about them having that.
And, as you said that, that sparked for me why, I'm moving in this coaching direction now instead of therapy. And both coaching and therapy can deal with the light and the shadow.
Right.
But how they deal with it is different because therapy, you're really going in to deeply repair and process the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in coaching, it's more learning to embrace and go for the goals that maybe shadow desire has there, or the limiting beliefs that are impacting you in the present to give you new beliefs. And both approaches are important.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's shadow everywhere. There's never not shadow.
Mm-hmm.
There's never not suffering. There's just never not. In a three-dimensional world where we have these bodies that die and where things can fade and change form, there's always going to be suffering.
I mean, people just assume that in the metaphorical, like, washing machine of life, um, that they can hide the red shirt amidst, like, the white shirts that they consider that, the deniable plausibility of the red shirt if there's enough white shirts in it. And it's like, no, no, no. Everything's turning pink and you're going to see in the dryer, like that red shirt's still going to affect the rest of everything. Like, you can't necessarily be um like, I don't know, it's just such an interesting concept that people place this concept of perfection, and that makes the spiritual bypassing even more like
Yes.
rampant.
And then there's this interesting thing, and part of my circling back and we named this episode Spiritual Bypassing and Codependency.
Mm-hmm.
Where that gets perpetuated, where spiritual bypassing gets perpetuated through codependency. And again, in my spiral, I'm coming back to full circle, and what's coming up for me right now is my codependent relationship within communities where there may be bypassing happening. And this is hard to look at. Like, it's really painful, scary stuff because it brings up that, the rejection and the fear of separation and losing people. And that's something I think keeps us so codependent, is this belief that we're going to end up alone if we share the fullness and the truth of who we are and how we feel. And again, if we don't share how we feel, if we don't share what's really going on with us, we don't give other people the opportunity to respond in a way that's authentic to them. And we need to give everyone the opportunity to speak what's authentically them, to break out of codependency. Because codependency, and I want to be so clear that until a year and a half ago, I had no idea what codependency was, and I've been a recovering codependent for my entire life. Because I unfortunately have that perfect storm of childhood trauma that grooms us into codependency, and it is more rampant in our culture than we realize. But, um, I'm really working on breaking free from this idea of being codependent where I have to manage other people's emotions to keep myself safe. And that's what I discovered codependency was. And it rocked my world, right? Because so many of us did have to stay quiet because we didn't have safe parents, or caregivers. We felt that we needed to parent our parents or our caregivers or other siblings or cousins or whatever. And we weren't given the full capacity to express ourselves authentically. And that's so the cure for codependency is authentic self expression without any attempts to create a certain response from the other person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I hope that makes sense. I know it's really big even for me to wrap my mind around, even though I've been hardcore deep diving the breaking free from codependency for the last year and a half. Because that meant looking at all of the relationships in which I was codependent, which was, spoiler alert, all of them. Mm-hmm. You can't, if it's showing up in one relationship, it's showing up in probably all of them, and it's not, no judgment, zero judgment. Again, this is like what we were built into based on how society has trained us to not show up for ourselves, to not see ourselves, to stay invisible, to stay silent, to not be weird, to not stand out, to not make a scene, to dim our light.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's like, society has shown us that like dimming our light makes us more like likable or whatever. So it's almost like even if you have people who are supportive of what you offer, if you're only offering 15% of you and they're accepting the 15% of you, like one day you could be like, screw this. I want to be, more authentic me in front of these people. It feels so shallow and, and as soon as you give them 25%, then they are like, whoa, this was not what we asked for.
There's a whole 10% here that we didn't agree to. You're only this 15%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's like, there are people out there that will be like, oh, interesting. Like, why am I seeing a different aspect of you? And, you can be like, I'm expanding, being as authentic as possible, which is very hard. Which is what will happen when you break out of codependent factors. Like,
and it's not easy, my friends.
No. Like, Zafriana and I are both, like, I'm probably earlier in the, like, I'm still, like, I'm farther along in my codependency healing journey than I was, a couple months ago. But I would say Safriana is closer to, like, the healed and healing regarding the codependency aspect. And I'm more in just, like, the healing. Like, I'm in the chrysalis stage, and Safriana's, like, her goo is basically like transformed her into like a really tired, like
permanently exhausted butterfly.
Yeah.
That's me. Permanently exhausted butterfly. And we're trying to move out of the permanently exhausted by breaking free from the codependency. And, thank you for sharing where you feel like you're at in your journey. I think it is so important that we acknowledge that there are people at all different stages, and there is no timeline, there is no one right way, there is no superiority that actually exists. Any superiority that you believe exists is entirely flippin' made up. It's made up. Who determined it?
Mm-hmm.
Trace it back. It's made up. So yeah, I told you, I was like, if we're going live on this podcast, like, I hope there's going to be some spice coming out.
I'm here for it. I'm here.
But, we really have this opportunity to step into our fullest selves and heal the world around us in doing so. And the number one way we do that is by not bypassing the shadow, not trying to control what other people think of us, feel in their own experience of us, any of that, any of these codependent trappings, and to just live more in our light. And when I say in our light, I mean what's shining on us, what lights us up, what's our zone of joy and our zone of genius and our truth.
Mm-hmm.
And part of our truth is the shadow.
And I want to caution people regarding, like, in the shadow work piece, that's when you start to recognize the authenticity aspect. And it's not like if people set boundaries, like, that's, they have every right to set boundaries, and you can't be like, but that's in the way of my authenticity. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if they have boundaries around that, but it's if it's not conducive to you living your authenticity, then you need to reevaluate, like, would you be willing to stay in that relationship with that person? And, you know there's some lights that are okay to be dimmed, like, some are easier to dim than others, and you're just like, yeah, like, I'm not going to be, this level of whatever with this person, and I'll, be this level with whatever with this person.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. We want to caution about safety because as somebody who's been severely traumatized over the course of my life and worked with people with all kinds of trauma, and I know you're getting into that now in your work, like there are times that it is not safe to be our authentic self, and you have to determine where you're at in that. Only you can, where you feel safe. I make the very bold choice, and my poor mother, bless her, it's like her worst freaking fear that I am going to get murked on the street for being me. And I have to imagine that that's like really scary. I choose to be the fullness of myself because I can't be anything else anymore. I made different choices in the past because I couldn't make any other choice in the past. Honor where you are at in your journey, whether you're in the chrysalis, like I'm trying to break out of this, the bypassing and the codependency, or you're like on the other side of it and you're like, God, this is really, really hard to maintain. That's where I'm at, this is really, really hard to maintain. This sure is uncomfortable. Ooh, right? So wherever you're at in the journey, or if you're even in a stage where you're like, no one can know who I am, I don't feel safe at all. And in that case, all you need to work on is learning for you to love you, which is where especially therapy work is so essential so that you can really get into some of the less delicious parts of the shadow, right? There's delicious parts of the shadow, trust me, but then there's the really uncomfortable and sticky and sometimes gross and very painful parts of the shadow, and that takes a healer's touch sometimes if you can't fully provide yourself with that, or you don't already have a support network for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, there's like I'm like thinking about like we're basically, when you have the shadow side of things, um it can also be a mixed bag when it comes to, if you decide like, when you're doing the shadow work, you can then discover, like, what is authentic versus what is shadow.
Right.
Right, like, shadow is part of our authenticity, but it's like, for example, someone can place a boundary about a way that you responded to something. And if you haven't done the shadow work, you can be like, well, that was just my authentic self, and you don't understand where I'm coming from, and blah, 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 blah.
There's wounded shadow and there's healed shadow. And I
Yeah.
think that there's wounded light and healed light, right? Because love and light can be great. But if it's coming from a wound of codependency and I can't stand up for myself, so I'm going to put on this people pleasing, fake face, that's not healed light either. So we want the shadow and light in harmony is what we're really looking for, right? And to heal the aspects of all of ourselves, all sides of ourselves that are appearing through their wounding in the world around us.
Mm-hmm.
I want to read this comment.
Yeah.
One of our viewers just said, I have grown into the stage when I am ready to be authentically open about my invisible identities more often than not in public, that being LGBTQ plus neurospicy and disabled. I'm not sure if this is the same person or not, but I appreciate you being a voice to end stigma by being yourself in public. And, thank you for saying that. I see there in this movement for activism, we have those of us who are the frontline fighters, the rogues, the clerics in the background doing the healing. We have the paladins doing some speaking. We've got, we have all these different kinds of people that are bringing what they can into the activism. And wherever you're at in your journey is an important place. I am very privileged to be in a place where I feel comfortable enough and safe enough to speak in this way. And as you grow into your ability to feel safe enough to be public about these aspects of yourself, I really encourage you to continue to find the community where you can be in that authentic self and celebrate that, because being in the joy of that more than the sorrow of that is, that's what helps us find that more inner balance. So,
yeah. And I like the invisible identity piece that this user was telling us about. Like, I was thinking about like what do we define as like shadow, and it's like society has defined different identities as shadow, right? But it's like when you do the work and you rip yourself free of societal biases, then you can realize like what is actually shadow, because there's also things that society may have deemed like might have put on a pedestal for some like productivity, or and capitalism. But yeah, and so it's like in this healing process you then also learn that like not everything you were taught as the shadow versus the light like
is what it is.
Is what it is. Yeah. Like there's a lot of concepts I remember as a kid like being like, oh yeah, Jesus, he sacrificed himself. That's the highest level of love.
I must now sacrifice myself.
I must be so selfless that I have nothing to give anymore by the time I hit the age of like 16. Like, what?
I don't love it. I don't love it for us.
And I know that they like, there's different lessons where they're like, no, that's not what we meant at all. But this autistic ass can't figure that out for themselves.
Well, and
when you're
in
like
some
10.
cases, it's taught very literally that is everything that it's supposed to mean, and then that gets into spiritual bypassing in its own way too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it can go one way or the other, right? This almost toxic positivity or toxic guilt and shame, really, and both are bypassing different aspects of the fullness of human experience.
It's bypassing our intuition.
Yeah. And our truth.
Yeah, because society has told us not to trust ourselves for so long.
Yeah, it has. It sure has.
Like, as soon as you are experiencing some sort of sensory overload and an adult tells you that, why are you acting this way? You're completely safe. Like, shut up.
And then we're just supposed to override. And we, that is something that is so pervasive, is bypassing our own experience due to authority figure feedback. And like, if there's anything that you can gently come into working on in yourself, may it be separating yourself from that voice of authority.
Yeah.
And authority over you, right? That you're somehow small, that there's something or someone or some system that can tell you are wrong for being you, that you are never wrong for being you.
Yeah. And I want to reiterate the gentleness of it, because that protective aspect of you that's like worried about, the authority figure piece, was probably created when you were so young.
Yes.
And so it's like you're trying to work with an aspect of you that was created, decades ago. And so it's just a reflex at this point. So if you find yourself in the middle of the reflex, celebrate the fact that you have the awareness of being like, oh, I caught myself. I noticed this.
That is literally the first step.
Yep.
And the more noticing, the more time you go between giving into it or feeling compelled by it.
Yep.
And that, I mean, it's a slow road to the healed stage. But, I do make this distinction quite often. I know I've been talking about it a lot lately, and I kind of mentioned it here, the distinction between being healed and continuing to heal versus healing. And again, there is no superiority standing on this side. That's why I don't believe in sides, really. I believe in spectrums in so many ways. Many spectrums of ways of being, but, a spectrum from harmonized to disharmonized or disharmonized to harmonized. And if you're genuinely in more harmony, you're not going to see anyone in less harmony as somehow lesser than you. It has nothing to do with harmony. So please, again, know that wherever you're at in your journey, even if it is like absolute terror, crippling terror to speak, to be seen, to be heard, that's okay. Like, I was there, and I don't judge you for being there. And I do believe that the more gently you hold yourself in that, the more easily you will be able to shift towards more harmony in yourself and harmonized communities that see and support you.
Mm-hmm. And I'm still there, but it's more around shame than fear.
Yes, whether it's shame or some other complex emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Big sigh, friends. Big heckin'
collective sigh.
Yep. We are doing some big collective healing together right now, and there's the opportunity for us to rise to the occasion of the communities that are offered, that are here to do the healing, the generational healing, the ancestral healing, the communal healing, the clique healing, all of it, all of this separation. So may you find your people to do this healing work with. And if that happens to be us, come see us, come talk to us, come join us. We're heckin' cute. And heckin' queer and heckin' fun. And we genuinely, accept all kinds of people.
Mm-hmm.
So may you find that acceptance for yourself and in others.
Yep.
So I think that was a good place to sign off.
Yep.
Until next time, we're Living Luna.